Test. The silent pain of male rejection. There are many different ways that people are rejected. It's not just one way. It's not just someone saying yes or no. There are more sophisticated versions of rejection, and there's different reasons why people choose these versions rather than just a yes or no. For some people, it's a safety thing. Um, but I'll start by saying the different versions of rejection that I've experienced. So, one version of rejection, a more cowardly version, is ghosting. Ghosting is a more modern iteration of rejection, and it comes in a technological age where empathy is something that is easy to miss because of the proximity we have between each other, and so it doesn't really harm a person emotionally to just ignore a person because they can't see the immediate effects of that person. There's no immediate consequences. So that's probably the go-to for a lot of people in the modern age. Um, Another one is the string along until it dies out method, where I've noticed for the women that I would try to talk to, um, sometimes they would say, "Hey, let's talk over text," right? But then there was no real interest in one of the things, and I don't know if other guys have experienced this, but you'll text a woman, but then she won't show any interest in you and ask you questions. You're just asking questions to a person. It's almost like you're giving them an interview that's about them, but they're not, you know, they're not throwing the ball back. They're just waiting for you to throw all the balls. Um, so what happens is you end up investing more and more and more until the person either decides to ghost you completely or block you. Um, that's another thing that happens. You try to talk to a person and they feign interest, so you think that they're interested, but then they get annoyed and block you. Another method is kind of another one is when you go up to a person and you don't even get their contact info, you don't even get to talk to them. You go up and talk to them briefly, you introduce yourself, but then they don't even acknowledge your existence. They don't even look your way. They just kind of they just kind of keep doing what they're doing. They resume what they're doing, but they don't acknowledge your presence. That is a more abject, a more disrespectful form of rejection that I've experienced that before. I haven't experienced that lately, which is interesting. But yeah, so I'm trying to think of another one real quick. So another form of rejection is there's this other one. I think it's more of a social rejection that comes as a result of a person not having social skills or being afraid. And sometimes they'll act out. They'll act I see this from women. They'll act like they're in disbelief that you're talking to them, and they kind of get this questionable face, this face of, I can't believe, why are you talking to me kind of face, right? And whenever a guy sees that, I mean, the best advice is just to move on from that interaction. Uh, the whole point is to meet people. I guess going up to people anyway, meet people, get contacts, hang out, have fun. Is what Coach Corey Wayne says. The bald guy that smiles. But yeah, rejection is one thing about rejection, especially male rejection, is that it's not something that is noticed. It's something that is just kind of a silent thing. And rejection is, I think rejection is dangerous without perspective. The reason why I say that is because there are guys who are rejected by small amounts of women. There are guys who are rejected by large amounts of women in the dating game, at least. And Now, the different perspectives I think is gonna tailor how each of them responds overall to the situation. Where I think the danger is the guy's putting all of his worth in whether he gets accepted by the person or not, and I think that's where the danger comes. And unfortunately, most guys put a lot of their worth into whether a woman accepts him or not. And how to change this, I don't know, but that's definitely a problem. Um, the men who feel rejection the most abjectly, I think, are men who don't really have a lot of options to begin with. Guys who have a lot of options, they don't really, rejection doesn't really bother them that much. They could either have the options or they can have the mindset of having those options as well. Um, Rejection is good and it's bad. On one hand, you get to learn about your weaknesses and you get to learn what works and what doesn't. But on the other hand, um, it kind of chips away at your self esteem. So you kind of have to balance um, how often you attempt to approach and speak to people because it it becomes a game of attrition. Like in war, you have to know when to pull back and when to advance. When you pull back, you're replenishing your reserves. It's very similar to that. Um, Also, if you go up too many times, then you risk repeating the same lines and you know other things like that. Um, the healing aspect of rejection, I think, comes when you actually start to get wins. But it also starts in the mind, and I think that's one thing that people who approach people for conversation or for dating have to learn that before and after you approach people, you have to make sure your mind is strong and your mind is in a high vibration because lower vibrations will only cause pain and sorrow, and it will cause you to to experience emotions that you wouldn't otherwise have to experience because the person's rejection really isn't that big a deal, but it also depends on how you take it. Um, the silent pain of male rejection.